friends, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are starting another episode of Tarot and Practice. If you're new here, the Tarot and Practice is a series on my channel where I basically vlog the experience of working with a particular deck in my collection. So over the period of a few weeks to a few months, depends how long it takes, I walk you through and give you examples of how I read with tarot. I do spreads, I do exercises, I tell you my interpretations of the cards and my experience working with the deck, and at the end of the video I do a little wrap up of a review of my experience, and I decide whether I want to keep the deck in my collection or not. Over on my community tab here on YouTube, I asked you which deck you would like to see me work with next. And it was a pretty close run there for a little while, but in the end, one deck edged out in front of the others, and that was the Gentle Tarot. Now, this is a brand new deck to me. It is still in order. I have not shuffled it. I managed to get it secondhand, which is great news for me. This is the first edition. I don't know if there's new editions, or I think there's a pocket edition coming out now, but this is a deck that I have not yet worked with. It says on the back of the box, the Gentle Tarot is an indigenous-made, hand-drawn tarot deck filled with imagery influenced by life in remote Alaska. This labor of love uses colorful art to inspire connection with our natural environment. There's also a really chunky little white book. I wouldn't even call it a little white book. It's more like a mini guidebook that comes in this little deck box set that I've got. And there's a whole page worth of information on every card, minor and major arcana. So I don't know that I have a whole lot more to say because I don't know a lot about this deck. So I think it's about time that we just dive right in and start working with it. So before we get stuck into doing any readings, I just sort of wanted to spend some time going through this deck and doing an exercise that is very common for a lot of people when they get a new deck. And that is just going through the cards one by one and separating them into a few different piles. The first pile is for cards that I feel fairly neutral about. Cards that I sort of understand the intention behind the image, that I feel like I can read with, but that don't sort of like stir a huge amount of emotion in me or anything like that. Another pile for cards that just really click with me, that I love the way that they're represented, that move me in some way. And a third pile for cards that either I actively dislike or that I look at and I don't understand. I think this is a great way of getting to know a deck that is new to you. It gets you sort of engaging with the artwork and considering what you already click with, and also analyzing and considering what you may be resisting or struggling with, so that you can start either working through those struggles and those resistances, or accepting that the deck isn't for you. Like it's a good beginning point when first getting to know a deck, especially one that deviates quite a bit from the traditional systems like the Rider-Waite-Smith. So I've got my piles, and about half the deck fits into the category of me feeling fairly neutral to positive about the card. Like it doesn't blow me away, but like I look at it and I feel like I can read with it. And then I have two much smaller piles that represent the cards that blew me away, that I really love the choices, that I don't know, just like sung to me in some way. And the other pile of cards that I kind of don't like, or I kind of don't get. And I'm not going to talk about all of these cards, but I thought it would be a good start just to discuss a few of them and what's coming up for me. So let's start with the cards that I do like. Firstly, the Devil. I love this Devil. To me, this is so powerful. I love the fact that we have a person like literally holding a chain and pulling whatever this heavy weight is behind them. Like this chain is not tied around their waist. It's not even tied around their hand. Like they're holding on to it. I also really like the symbolism of like the red footsteps or the marks on the ground. I think that represents where this person has been, and that they're sort of just like going through the motions of putting one step in front of the other. Like there's this repetition that I think that symbolizes really well, that is so inherent in things like habits and addiction. I don't know, to me this is just really poignant. And as someone who struggled with substance abuse and addictive tendencies, I think this is really powerful. I love the Eight of Cups. This was one of those cards that I found really moving. I love that there's sort of like a crack down her body. Like there's this suggestion that she's been through quite a lot, that she's been damaged in some way, but she's also drinking from one of the cups. There's 7 cups on the ground, but she has picked one up and she's drinking. And it just feels like this really emboldened, empowering statement that she's choosing to move forward, that she's choosing to heal. I love the Ace of Thunder. In this deck, the swords are replaced with thunder, and I love that. I just love this sort of, I don't know, it's almost like a tower moment, but not. It doesn't have the upheaval that the tower often symbolizes, but it feels like this strike of clarity. And I love how the hands are sort of reaching up, suggesting that like, I don't know, like a willingness and acceptance for this new inspiration or whatever is coming forth. It's really strong. The 8 of Thunder, the 8 of Swords, I love this. I love how there's a lot of like lines around the character that do sort of throw back to the 8 of Swords that we are used to seeing. But to me, I'm not sure if the thunderbolts are supposed to be, or the lightning bolts are supposed to be laying on the ground, and that was what was intended. But when I first saw this card, what I thought of was that idea of sort of sending all those worries and those fears into the earth to be neutralized. The 10 of Swords, the 10 of Thunder, I love this. To me, as soon as I saw this, I thought of rock bottom. That's what I thought. It looks like this character has hit rock bottom. There is nowhere else for them to go. They've reached the lowest point they can. And they've decided to use all of those experiences, all of those cracks in the walls, these lightning bolts, to pull themselves up. And it just made me think of how all of the things that like tear us down and make our lives difficult, sometimes they can become the things that we use to empower ourselves. I honestly, I teared up the first time I looked at this card. I thought it was beautiful. The 10 of Stones, I really like. I often think of the 10 of Stones or the 10 of Pentacles as like legacy. And I love, to me, this rings really true of that. I don't know if that was the intention, but how this character is almost like clearly creating something and has created something, but is now like blending into the background, blending into the scenery. Almost it's like what they have left behind is their gift to future generations. It's like them themselves is not the point. It's what they've left behind, what they've given. I just love it. The Root of Stones, which is the Knight of Pentacles equivalent. I really like this. The imagery of the bee, the hard worker, the one that goes out to collect the pollen, just really works for me. The Hierophant, I honestly have no idea what this means. I read the guidebook and like I can sort of get myself to understanding it sort of, but it just, when I look at this card, it does not scream Hierophant to me. The Strength card, I think in this deck, rainbows are supposed to represent spirit or inspiration or hope or something. But when I first saw this, and I can't unsee it, I thought it was oil, and the whale was sort of like getting caught up in oil, and I just found it really distressing. The Justice card, I don't understand what's happening in this card, and I don't know what these little pouches are. I don't get it. The Root of Cups, which is the equivalent to the Knight of Cups. Again, I don't get it. Same with the Flower of Cups, which is equivalent to the Queen of Cups. The Harvest of Cups, equivalent to the King of Cups. I think my issue here is animals. I don't recognize these animals, and they don't mean anything to me. Same with the Flower of Wands, which is the Queen of Wands, and the Harvest of Wands, which is the King of Wands. Now, the Five of Thunder, interestingly, this is a card that I just sort of didn't really get at first, but I read the little white book and now I love it. So this card will be moving from this pile into my love pile. But I did just want to read this to you and show you like how poignant and beautiful this guidebook can be. She was striving to climb to the top of the ridge when she realized that reaching the peak was not actually something that she really needed. Fox friend helps take her lightning bolt, offering to the top. Too often we push ourselves too hard for too long. We stay in relationships, interpersonal or professional, when we know we should leave, or we refuse to surrender in a fight. Whether that fight is with someone else or is an internal struggle of our own, know that resolution is possible. But first, you have to know that it is okay to surrender. I thought that was beautiful, and I love how rather than representing the conflict in the Five of Swords, this is representing more, I don't know, the lesson or the suggestion or the medicine of the Five of Swords, and I think it's beautifully done. So no big conclusions just yet. I don't want to make it sound like I don't like this deck, because I do. I think it's beautiful. This is more just an acknowledgement of the fact that this is very animal heavy, and I've said before that I don't often connect with animal decks, and I sort of knew that going into this one. I was obviously hopeful that I would just click with every card, but clearly that has not been the case, so I think it's just going to be a little bit of extra work for me. That's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm hoping I can make it work. I just wanted to sort of go through the cards one by one and sort of explore my initial response to them. Hopefully I can sort of work with the cards and find a way to connect to them for myself. I have already read the little white book for all of them, so that's a start. And from there, I think it'll just be about, as they come up in readings, like taking time to sit with them, allowing them to maybe not speak to me immediately, and hopefully their voice and their message will emerge the more time I spend with them. And like I said, I'm not saying that this is not a great deck. It's beautiful. I know so many of you adore it. I struggle to connect with heavily animal symbolism. And let's be real, pretty much all of the cards that I pulled out as cards that I don't like or that I struggle with are like featuring animals that I don't have any personal relationship with, any personal experience with, that I know very little about. But I have found this useful just for me mentally, like preparing myself to shuffle this deck and start working with it. Just sort of, I don't know, getting a lay of the land, a nice bird's eye view of where I am at with this deck. So we are back at my table to do a deck interview spread today with the Gentle Tarot. I know we did a deck interview spread with the Children of Lither in the last episode of Tarot in Practice, but I just feel like this is a brand new deck. I have the urge, I have the itch to introduce myself and ask the deck to introduce itself to me. So that's what we're doing today. So I have done a full video detailing the spread that I use for deck interviews. So a link to that video will be in the description box below and in the cards above if you're interested. So I'm going to go ahead and shuffle and draw my cards, and then we'll talk about the spread. Okay, let me tidy this up and then we'll have a look at the spread positions. And the first thing I notice about this spread is that the cards look beautiful all laid out together. The second thing I'm noticing is that there are several cards that have popped up in this spread that I picked out as cards that I didn't really like or didn't really click with in our first exercise. So our first card is, what can you teach me? What is the deck here to teach me? And we've got the Flower of Stones, which, if I remember correctly, is equivalent to the Queen of Pentacles. Got this beautiful big bear sort of floating down a stream. One thing I want to point out with this deck is that I do really love that the court cards have the numbers, like this one is numbered number 13. So even though the courts are renamed, if you ever forget, you can sort of figure it out quite easily with the number up the top. I think this card is so sweet, and it just has such a lazy, chill, laid back sort of vibe. So maybe this deck is here to just teach me to chill out a little bit and enjoy myself a bit more. Encourage me to indulge in the things that I like doing for the sake of pleasure and enjoyment and nothing else. So position number 2 is for the deck to describe itself. And we've got the 8 of Stones, or the 8 of Pentacles. And while the 8 of Pentacles does often refer to hard work, dedication, diligence, I'm also just noticing the attention to detail here. Like there's a delicate hand, and I love in particular how the face in this card is sort of just an outline. Like it's not imposing, it's just there, but it's not like a full figure. And so I'm sort of thinking of the deck in that way, of this face up in the corner, of a gentle guidance, of sort of the opposite of a helicopter parent, if that makes sense. And I am getting that this deck may be a little bit more detail oriented rather than big picture oriented. It's delicate, it's gentle, but it's also very precise. And then the next card is card number 3 for the deck to describe how it sees me as a reader. And we've drawn the Justice card, which is an interesting one to come up because obviously the Justice card is associated with Libra. I'm a Libra. But also this was a card that I selected as one that I didn't really get upon first glance. Maybe the deck is recognizing that I'm someone that cares a lot about my impact in the world and sort of the role that I play in society, in my community, my footprint. I care about my footprint. I'm also thinking about the black and white pouches, although I don't really understand what these pouches are, what they represent. The black and white thinking is something that I have a pretty big problem with, and it can really influence my ability to make decisions. And I know the Justice card can often be about a very important decision. And so maybe the deck is also recognizing that black and white thinking in me. Card number 4 represents how the deck and I can work together. And we drew Temperance. And I don't know why, but this is actually kind of making me a bit emotional all of a sudden. Like genuinely, I think I need a minute. And it's not any particularly overtly strong message that's coming up or anything. I was just thinking of balance. And as someone with bipolar disorder, that is sort of like an ongoing journey and practice for me. I also thought about the idea of becoming more comfortable and secure in my own little place in the world, in my own little piece in the larger puzzle. And it just looks like such a beautiful, liberating, mindful, sweet, gentle, loving card. It's just gorgeous, and something about it is touching me. Position number 5 is what the deck sees as its own strengths. And we've got the Root of Cups, which is equivalent to the Knight of Cups. And this was one of the cards that I pulled out as not really making a whole lot of sense to me. I think this is a salmon. I remember reading in the guidebook maybe, but I don't know. I mean, I know about the only thing I know about salmon is that bears eat them and that they swim up the river that they were born in to reproduce and then they die. I mean, I guess there is that pursuit that the knights often represent, and maybe, I don't know, returning home, following your heart, something. I feel like it's a card I could make work. It doesn't come naturally or easily to me. So how about we have a little look at the guidebook here. So as you can see, there's quite a bit of information, but it's not until right down the bottom here that we get some information about sort of what's depicted in the card. It says, feel free to try meditating as a salmon, newly arriving from the ocean. You have reached cool, crisp, fresh waters once again, returning to the stream and the lake where you were born. Feel the excitement on your fresh, scaly skin. Know the precision of your muscles and the excitement in your blood. I suppose the word precision jumped out to me as I was mentioning over here in the 8 of Stones. I think I mentioned I was talking a lot about detail oriented, so precision I think makes sense for me. I also do think of the Knight of Cups as the most sweet and gentle of the knights, which being the gentle tarot also makes sense. I think of the Knight of Cups as being quite romantic and sensitive and nostalgic, imaginative, dreamy, maybe a little prone to fantasy, maybe even a little bit needy sometimes. So position number 6, I drew 2 cards. This is the deck's weaknesses, and I've drawn the Lovers and the Strength card. Yeah, the Strength card was one of the cards that I pulled out as not quite clicking with me. This was not a card that I immediately felt like really meant a lot to me. The Lovers I sort of felt quite neutral about. To me, the Lovers is often about choice, but more specifically about the choice to commit. It's about commitment. And that can be to another person or to a higher ideal or a value or something like that. And often the Strength card represents to me the process of understanding ourselves, our shadows, our challenges, but also identifying with our higher self so that we can harness our inner strength and move through the world confidently and in line with who we truly are. And honestly, there's a few ways I could go with this. I could sort of tie those meanings together that I already have of these 2 cards. Or maybe it's just not going to come on super strong and it's not really here to help me make decisions and choices. That's not what it wants to do. Those aren't its strong suits. Maybe this deck doesn't see itself as being particularly strong in romantic readings, and maybe it's not also for super deep, like diving into the depths of our consciousness sort of readings either. I don't know. I'm honestly not getting some kind of really strong feeling or intuitive hit with this. It is strange, given that I had such a strong emotional response to the Temperance card, to then move on to these 2 cards and sort of not, well, these 3 cards really, and not really have, I don't know, a particular sense of much. And then the final position number 7, is our potential together. And I've again drawn 2 cards. These sort of popped right out of the deck. We've got the 4 of Cups and the 9 of Cups. And honestly, I'm thinking of these 2 very much in relation, given that this character is sort of looking over at this card. And I'm just thinking, my first thought here was sort of, I don't know, like this deck is going to help me get out of funks, get out of my own head, and move into spaces that are much more positive and optimistic. I think we often think of the 4 of Cups as being somehow oblivious or avoidant, or ignorant. And I don't know, just this hit me quite strongly of moving out of that space of ignorance, and this deck helping me, I don't know, fulfill my dreams, or even realize, become aware of my dreams and what it is that I want, to dream bigger, to dream brighter, to be more optimistic and hopeful. So this has been quite an odd experience. It is strange having such an emotional response to one card and then sort of I don't know, not flowing with other cards, and I'm not struggling to read them because like I do understand the very basic meaning, but not feeling like the deck is singing to me with certain positions. I'm not really sure what to do next from here. Is it just a matter of exposure? Is it just a matter of continuing to work with the deck, and the more these cards come up, the more I start to sort of fit the puzzle pieces together? I've already read through the guidebook and like I know what the intended meaning of these cards are. But if I can't connect to them personally, emotionally, I struggle to then fit them into readings, if that makes sense. Like I can read, you know, what the guidebook says about the Root of Cups every time it comes up to the point where I memorize it. But if I don't understand it intrinsically, intuitively, if I don't have some response when I draw this card out, I don't know, my readings are always going to be like a little bit stunted in that way. And maybe this is literally the position I'm in right now, this Four of Cups sort of moment, and this is where I need to get to with this deck, and the deck seems to think there is that potential. So I don't know, at least for this video I'm just going to trust the process. I'm going to keep working with it, and yeah, I don't want to come across like super negative, because I really want to like this deck, and I mean I already like it, but I really want it to become a part of my practice. I'm not quite there yet. Hello, welcome to my reading chair. This is my favourite spot in the house, so I thought I'd bring you down here to do a bit of a self-care reading. I've done a few readings with the Gentle Tarot since I did the deck interview. I wanted to sort of play around with it on my own for a few little readings, and I've sort of had a similar experience where I'm finding some cards are coming up and just like blowing me away, making me really emotional, and other cards are just not clicking. I just thought this self-care spread that I actually did a video about a long time ago on one of my therapeutic tarot videos would be a great spread for this deck. So this spread is all about sort of placing where I'm at the moment in terms of like my mental space, my emotional space. So it's sort of about getting a snapshot of where I'm at and then figuring out what it is that I want and what I need. So this is a 4-card reading, nice and simple. I'm going to shuffle the cards and then we can talk about my spread. So the first card represents, I think. So I drew 2 cards. I really tried not to, but they were stuck together. And it's the Ace of Thunder and the Four of Thunder, both of which are cards that I really liked. They're cards that I picked out as really speaking to me in our first exercise. I feel, the 8 of Stones comes up again for my second position. I've got the 2 of Cups for position number 3. I drew the 9 of Thunder, so lots of Thunders in this spread, and the 10 of Wands. This deck loves spitting up a couple of cards for each position, doesn't it? So for the first position, which is I think, which represents like what I'm thinking at the moment, where my mental headspace is at. So for this position, I drew 2 Thunder cards, which are the equivalent of the swords in this deck. I drew the Ace and the 4. And in the Ace, I know this is like a lightning bolt kind of coming down from the sky, representing like inspiration and clarity. But when I first saw it today, I thought more of a crack. Very recently, in the last few days, there has been a bit of a break in some unhealthy thought patterns that I was sort of buying into recently, specifically around my need to prove my worth. As you know, I've started a new job and I think I had some really high expectations of myself. And I mean, I'm a perfectionist. That's sort of like inherent in so much of how perfectionism functions, is like creating and making us believe that we have to not only reach like sort of like acceptable levels, but to exceed unattainable levels all the time. And I think just in the last day or two there has been a break in that for me. I think there's been this realization that balance is a lot more important, and like, yes, I can do my best, but there's no need to sort of always be measuring myself against these unattainable expectations, you know? And so in a way that is a moment of clarity, but I also just really like the imagery of something cracking, of the facade of the image itself sort of breaking apart. And I think I do have a much stronger awareness of the importance at the moment for me to take it easy sometimes and sort of balance like the learning and the growing and the new and the big and the scary with moments of quiet and solitude. I don't know, I guess I just feel like I do have quite a lot of clarity and insight around all of that at the moment, and these 2 cards represent that well for me. The next card represents how I feel, and this is the 8 of Stones, which has come up for us already, and I really love that this card's come up for me, because I think so much of this is about hard work, dedication, but there's like a practicality and a groundedness to it, as well as I think a lot of satisfaction that comes from this. And at the moment, with me learning so much new stuff, sort of trying to get to grips with the ropes and like learn the ins and outs of a new job and a new workplace and all of the things that comes with that. At first, that was just purely overwhelming, nothing but overwhelm. But as I said, in the last few days, things have shifted, and I am starting to sort of like enjoy the process of like learning these new skills and learning these new processes. I'm enjoying the everyday, the mundane, like the practical side of doing my new job, of the working, you know? And even though I still feel like I have so much to learn, I still have so far to go, it feels really satisfying. And even though this new situation, selling children's books instead of like the esoteric bookstore that I have been working in, is an entirely new skill that I have to develop, it's one I'm really excited to learn and to, I don't know, see out through the long haul, you know what I mean? Like take my time getting really good at it. And I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying the learning part and the learning as I do part at the moment. The next card represents what I want, and I got the Two of Cups. So the Two of Cups is representative of a connection, of a meeting of two people, of an exchange of some kind, usually an emotional one or a symbolic one, like a gesture or an emotional connection, something like that. It's mutually beneficial, there's a reciprocity, there's like a coming together and a sharing. And I think what I've wanted for a long time and what I'm starting to think that I might be able to have is a feeling of like where I'm working, it being mutually beneficial, like feeling like I'm a participant, like I'm contributing to something important and like I'm valued. Like this is not a one-way deal, you know, it's not a one-way exchange. It's not just a giving or just receiving. Both are happening at once. And then for the final position, which represents what I need, I drew the two cards, the Nine of Thunder and the Ten of Wands. And I think these work so beautifully together. And I love for the Nine of Thunder how the character here is sort of draped in this heavy black cloak. And it's in the cloak that we see the thunderbolts or the lightning bolts. It sort of feels like it's almost sludge and like they're finally being able to come up for air. Like they're trying to reframe their thoughts. They're trying to go through the process of moving away from or reframing those thoughts that come from a place of extreme anxiety rather than from reality. And I think that is something that I, as someone with complex mental illness, need to continue to do all of the time, but especially when I'm in periods of big change, big scary change, I can be very prone to black and white thinking, to extreme thinking, to very anxious thinking and thought processes that sort of end up being like this vicious cycle. So I think this card is sort of saying like keep doing what you're doing in terms of like challenging those thoughts, reframing those thoughts, keep moving away from being like trapped in and like sucked into this vicious cycle of anxiety. Keep trying to, you know, do all that CBT, that DBT work that I am trying to practice. The Ten of Wands though feels like a little bit of a warning. The first thing I thought of when I saw this card was that I need to really stand in my own power and remember that it's okay to say no, to have strong boundaries, that I'm carrying a heavy load already, like between all of the other stuff that I've got going on top of a new job. And I know I'm talking a lot about this new job, but it's a big part of my life at the moment. So obviously it's the stuff that's coming up in my tarot readings, but I'm already carrying about as much of a load as I can. I'm already sort of expending my spoons each and every day. And I don't want to, you know, take on one too many things that ends up being the thing that breaks the camel's back and sending me into relapse or anything like that. Like I'm managing at the moment, but I need to be cautious of, you know, that desire to please, to like impress, you know, the people that I'm now working for. And I need to be strong enough to say no when I know that I need to say no. I hope that makes sense, but that's sort of what's coming up for me with this. Keep doing what I'm doing and working on those extreme anxiety thoughts that were starting to take a hold, but I'm starting to get on top of again. And also just be aware of my own limitations and be firm with my boundaries to make sure that I can remain healthy and strong. And I really enjoyed this reading. This was great. It was easy, it flowed, but it still brought up some really important things for me to keep in mind and to prioritize at the moment. So today I wanted to do a 2-card pull that you will be very familiar with if you've watched a few of these tarot and practice videos by now, and that is doing well, do better. This is one of my favorite little spreads, so that's what we're going to do today. What am I doing well at the moment? Got the 8 of Wands, and what do I need to do better? Got the Seed of Thunder, which is equivalent to the Page of Swords. So for the what I'm doing well, I got the 8 of Wands, which has these 8 branches and then sort of looks like bubbles, but also like the moon phases, these circles here. And we do also have some flames here, which works for the Suit of Wands. It's a pretty simple card, and the first thing I'm thinking of is like with the moon phases here is just like the ebb and flow of energy, and that a lot of people do associate the moon and the moon phases, like they kind of correlate that to their magic and their manifestation work. And with that, there's sort of like a building of energy that's associated with, for a lot of people, the full moon, and like a waning of energy with like the moving towards the dark moon. And I like that. I like that depiction. For me, it works quite well for the idea that I often associate with the 8 of Wands of momentum, movement, and energy. And for what I'm doing well at the moment, I think there are a few areas of my life where I feel like I am putting in work, I am putting in intention, and I'm starting to notice that build-up of momentum and sort of moving in the direction of what it is that I'm aiming to achieve. One example that I think will be evident to you, maybe if you've noticed, is here on my YouTube channel. I have like doubled the amount of uploads that I'm doing for the month of November and December. And that has resulted for me a feeling of momentum returning to my channel. I think after taking such a long break, I'd sort of lost that, which is fair enough. It makes sense. But sort of pushing myself to upload a whole lot more, like sort of forces myself to come up with more ideas, to try more things. I don't know. It's just, I feel like I'm in a bit more of a creative flow with my YouTube channel, and I feel a bit more of that energy coming back from my viewers. I don't know. I feel good about my channel at the moment. I feel like I'm moving in a good direction. Same with my new job. I do feel like I've been there about a month now. I feel like I'm starting to find my feet a bit. I feel like I'm starting to build a bit of momentum with like the skills and the knowledge that I need to develop in order to do my job well. I don't know, if we're thinking of cycles and the moon phases, I do feel like I'm on a bit of an upward trajectory at the moment in terms of what it is that I want in my life and what it is I want to achieve. And I think that works well for the 8 of Wands and this depiction specifically. And then for what I need to do better, or what I need to focus on, I drew the Seed of Thunder, which is equivalent in this deck to the Page of Swords. I love in this card how we have this sweet little fox sort of bounding through the snow. It feels very light, very airy, very joyous, very free. Also quite playful, maybe a bit mischievous. It's just, it's a really fun card. I like it a lot. And for me and my elemental associations, the Page of Swords is equivalent to air of air. Swords being air for me, and pages also being air. There's a lot of air energy going on for me in the Page of Swords. And I think that really works for this depiction, with the fox literally being off the ground, you know, up in the air. And we do sort of see a suggestion of that in the Rider-Waite-Smith, with the page almost like stepping away from the earth, like they're on their tippy toes, like they look like they could float away. So I like that works for me and my own personal elemental association. And I think there's a few different ways I could go with this, what I need to do better. It could be a suggestion that I need to invite a bit more of that curiosity and playful energy into my life. But just in terms of what I was saying with the 8 of Wands and that sort of upward trajectory, and the flow of energy and the movement, I do sort of feel like, I don't know, at least maybe it's because I have bipolar and sometimes I can get a bit concerned when I'm happy and joyous that I'm leaning towards manic. And I think with this card, this is just a reminder that right now, it's not that I'm manic, it's not that I'm getting manic, it's just that I'm in a really good place. I'm happy, I'm excited, I'm passionate, not because I'm getting manic, but because there's a lot of in my life to be happy, excited, and passionate about. You know what I mean? And so what I'm getting from this card is just to sort of embrace where I am at the moment, embrace that feeling of levity and liberation and curiosity rather than fearing it. Embrace that my feet are off the ground at the moment, that I'm in an uncomfortable but exciting new sort of space rather than wanting to be so grounded and comfortable and safe. Throw caution to the wind a little bit, you know, and just go with it. Because I do think that the Page of Swords, although very mindful, is not overly cautious. And so that's sort of the message that I'm drawing from this card for me today. So a quick little reading, but I just love this doing well, do better, because I think for me, it's just this perfect balance of affirmation, validation, a pat on the back, mixed with like a bit of encouragement, push in the right direction. Even though it's only 2 cards, I always walk away feeling like I've been validated, I've been celebrated, I feel good about myself, but also like I have a little bit of opportunity for redirection or focused of direction, you know, like it's just a perfect little mini reading, and I love it. And I have to say, I really enjoyed this particular reading with the Gentle Tarot. Both of the cards that came up, even though I don't think the Eight of Wands was a card that I picked as one that I particularly liked in our first exercise, it just sort of clicked for me in this reading and in this context. So this was a great experience and I'm feeling good. Okay, my friends, we have reached the end of this intensive little period with the Gentle Tarot. And I have a lot of thoughts, but I'm not sure how certain I am about any of them. So let's just have a bit of a chat. So firstly, the artwork in this deck is gorgeous. The intention and the heart also comes through so clearly in the guidebook. For me, I feel like this is such a well thought out deck made from a space of generosity and love. And there's so much about it that I really love. Some of the cards in this deck are some of my favorite cards ever. I would say especially for the Suit of Swords, not all of the cards, but a lot of the cards in that suit just literally made me emotional the first time I looked at them. Like I had that experience of recognition and validation when I looked at those cards. I saw my own experience and like really deep intrinsic experiences in the cards. And that is such a beautiful gift to receive from a deck. And it's also something that doesn't happen all the time. Like that is quite a rare experience and a very special one. However, I'm sure you could tell throughout the video that although there were plenty of cards that I totally got, that I really loved, that I really connected with, there were a handful of cards that I struggled with. And I sort of knew that going in to a certain extent. And I think, you know, I made that clear at the outset of this video. I have spoken plenty of times before about how I don't tend to enjoy animal decks. I struggle to connect with them. Obviously, there's exceptions to every rule, but the general rule for me has been that animal decks, no matter how much I love the artwork, no matter how much I want to support the creator, no matter how much I love the intention and every other element of the deck, sometimes I just struggle to click with them. I think all of the cards in this deck that I struggled with were animals that are not native to the very big continent that I live on. Not only that they're not native, but they're not prevalent. Like most of these animals I have never seen before. I may have seen in a documentary here and there, but like to me, I've used this analogy before, but like to me, some of these animals are as strange and exotic and mythical as a unicorn is to most people. You know what I mean? Or I'm more familiar with a unicorn than I am with some of these animals. I will leave a link below to the video I made many years ago about why I tend to not enjoy animal decks, because it's more than just I don't know this animal. Like there's some kind of other emotional elements behind it. And I do feel like even though this is not an animal deck, there is an awful lot of animal symbolism. And that has been the thing that I've struggled with. And so I was feeling very conflicted about this deck, whether to keep it, whether to move it on, whether to keep trying. Even halfway through this video, I wasn't sure if I should keep pushing through the exercises and filming them. But something about this deck kept making me want to try. You know, something about the artwork and how beautiful it is and how intentional and meaningful the words in the guidebook are, something kept drawing me back in despite myself. And especially when I had really emotional moments with this deck. I mean, you saw one of them, but I did do a few other readings during this period and I just wanted to, you know, spend time with the cards and just me without the camera. And I had another moment where I drew the cards and I just started crying. And it's funny going through and editing this footage and rewatching the deck interview spread and the outcome position of the Four of Cups and the Nine of Cups, I think it was. I sort of thought the Four of Cups represented where I was and the Nine of Cups might represent where the deck thinks we can get. Instead, I think that those two cards represent perfectly how I feel at the moment. I am the Four of Cups, looking longingly off over at the freedom and the celebration and the connection happening in the Nine of Cups, and just longing and wishing for my relationship with this deck to be that experience, to be the Nine of Cups. But instead, I'm sitting in the Four of Cups, just sort of feeling like I can't quite get the inspiration, I can't quite find the connection. So before I press record for this final segment of this video, I drew one last card to ask the deck if it wanted to stay with me. Does it want to stay in my collection? I felt like I should just let it make the decision for us, you know? And the card that popped up was the Seed of Wands, which is equivalent to the Page of Wands, and it's this cute little seal. Now, I do think of the Page of Wands as someone who is quite excitable and enjoys adventure. So when I first sort of looked at this, I was like, okay, maybe the deck is ready to go on to the next adventure. Maybe it's even feeling a bit tired and restless, sort of like hanging around and waiting for me to click, you know? But in the guidebook, the very first little paragraph reads, "I'm the spotted seal, ready to lead the way. My creative passion is contagious. Let us swim together. Somewhere new. Let us play." And so that pretty much sold me. I was done. Like, I'm not sure if this deck wants to stay with me long term. I'm not sure how long our relationship will last. But to me, that was pretty clear. Let us swim together. And so I'm going to follow this deck's lead. The other sort of little message that I got from this is, the let us play. I think I need to stop trying so hard with this deck and just be a bit more playful, be a bit more spontaneous, curious, open-minded, and just enjoy the process a bit more. I think maybe I've been putting a bit too much pressure on myself as the reader and the deck as well. And this deck ain't here for that. It just wants to have a bit of a good time. So at least for now, the Gentle Tarot will be staying with me in my collection. I don't know how long for. I don't know what the future holds for the two of us. And I could feel myself being somewhat hesitant, with the idea of passing this deck on. That was not the gut feeling I had. I'm aware that I do want to sort of be very intentional about what decks I do keep. I don't want to keep decks around just for the sake of having decks around. And with the Tarot de Saint Croix, for example, when I knew that I was ready to let go of that deck, not because there was anything wrong with the deck, I'm sure I could have kept it and I could have read with it occasionally and been more than happy. But it just felt like it didn't belong with me, it would be better served sending it off to someone else who would enjoy and celebrate it more. I don't have that same feeling with this deck. Instead, it was more this hesitancy of, I don't know that I'm ready to let it go. And drawing that card, drawing the Seed of Wands, it just feels like the deck's not ready to let me go either. So we may have a month together, we may have a year, we may have 10. I have no idea, but I'm just going to be a bit more playful, a little bit more laid back, and see how things go. And if you have any thoughts on maybe some exercises or readings that you think would really suit the Gentle Tarot and help me sort of connect with it in a more playful, spontaneous way, I would love to hear that in the comments below. Thank you, of course, to my wonderful patrons over on Patreon for all of their support, and especially big thank you goes to my high tier patrons, Livia, Lynette Brown, Laurie, and Ian Yitzhak, for their very generous support of me, and thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. I would love to talk to you in the comments below, and I'll see you again in the next video. Until then, so much love. Bye.